to another Stories from Richland episode. We've had a great series of this so far, talking to people like Reg Untersayer and Dara Quinn and Kathleen Flanagan, and it's been really great so far. And today I'm happy to be sitting with Justin Raffa, who is the artistic director of the Mid-Columbia Mastersingers, super involved in local, running things, organizations, just someone really involved in both the community and the artistic community here in the Tri-Cities. Justin, thanks for sitting down with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in. So you grew up in New Jersey, correct?
That's right. South Jersey, to specify.
Yes.
You know, we talk a lot about Eastern versus Western Washington here. In New Jersey, it's North and South. So South
That's
Jersey, grew up closer to Philadelphia, and it's the rural part of the state that gives it the nickname the Garden State.
Gotcha. Huh? I spent some years in New York, but never made it down to Jersey. So that's actually good to know.
Yeah.
So you moved out to the Tri-Cities, I believe around 2009, 2010, correct?
Yeah, summer of 2008, I moved here to take on the leadership of the Mastersingers, the artistic role.
Awesome. So was there a moment when you got out here when you realized that there was something unique about the Tri-Cities, or that it had a unique perspective on history because of the Hanford site and its involvement in the Manhattan Project? Talk about maybe a moment when you realized there was something special with regards to the history of this place.
Sure. I mean, I kind of joke in that I discovered that something was very different the first day I arrived. As an East Coast transplant who had been living in Arizona on the Mexican border for several years, I really was not familiar with the Pacific Northwest in general. You know, my perceptions of Washington State are the standard stereotypes, and when I initially was looking at this job offer, I had an impression of Seattle and cool, rainy climates, and didn't realize until I came for my interview that the east side of the state, everything east of the Cascades, is a very different landscape on many fronts.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started shopping around for a place to live, I was looking at apartments and things, and a lot of those business owners asked me, what brings you to the Tri-Cities? Are you working at Hanford? Are you working at PNNL? And I can't tell you how many times I got that question.
Mm-hmm.
And said, no, I'm working for a local choral organization. Perhaps you've heard of them, the Mid-Columbia Mastersingers. Like, no one knew what this group was. Said, oh, well, they just recently changed their name. Perhaps you've heard of them as Consort Columbia. They've been around since 1986, and still a lot of people that weren't aware of that organization. So I knew I had my work cut out for me to help connect the arts and culture efforts here to the broader community, which is part of the reason that I was attracted here and ended up taking the job. There's a lot of opportunity. But shortly after I learned all about the Manhattan Project involvement and the role of the Hanford site. And I really knew nothing about it. Yeah, in high school, in social studies classes, we kind of had a brief overview. I mean, I'd heard of the Manhattan Project, and I certainly was aware of the Los Alamos site, the Trinity test, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, kind of broad details. But I was so intrigued to learn that one of those three sites was right here, now in my backyard. So I really absorbed as much of that information as I could. And a lot of professional circles that I was getting involved with were very heavy-handed in Hanford. We understand that Hanford is still such a big part of the local economy in Tri-Cities, the number of jobs that it produces. It's a big element of the community, and it's a big element of the future of the community. And then I found out they did tours at one of the old reactors. I was like, what? That's awesome. So, got involved with that, finally got to take a tour. That was back, of course, before the site became a national park,
mm-hmm.
and access was a lot more controlled. You still had to be a U.S. citizen. You had to show identification. It was a lot more of a controlled environment, and that's where I first started to get this kind of wild idea about, this would be a really cool space for a concert someday.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of speaking to what you've mentioned a little bit about here, about realizing that we're kind of a unique community and things like that. What do you see as the role of an artist like yourself in a kind of a smaller town setting like this with unique history where there's a strong but small artistic community reaching out to the community as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that arts and culture has not been a central element to this community. It's sort of been auxiliary. And, you know, when you look back at the real startup of this area in the 1940s with the building of the Hanford site, some of our most established performing arts organizations in particular trace their history to those times. So the thousands of workers that were imported here in such a short amount of time, they were singers, they were actresses, they played orchestral instruments, and they still wanted to have an opportunity to make art, to work together, to have that kind of respite from the intensity and at that time the secrecy around their workday, things that they weren't, you know, many of them weren't allowed to talk about, couldn't even
Mm-hmm.
tell their spouses what they were doing. So I think that, you know, they needed this emotional artistic outlet. And so we had the start of the Mid-Columbia Symphony, the start of Richland Players, the start of what was the Richland Light Opera Company that's now Mid-Columbia Musical Theater. So I'm really intrigued by that original formation of those companies that came from Hanford workers, their spouses, their families that still wanted opportunities to make art because that's what they did in their communities where they lived before. So I think that's a really cool history for our industry locally. And today, I think arts and culture plays such a significant role in the livability of a community. You know, we talk a lot about the quality of life in our communities. You know, when Hanford, when PNNL, when major businesses and contractors are looking to attract a highly skilled employment workforce, when they're looking to attract people and then to retain them, having a good job, having a nice big house, you know, that's certainly part of the equation. But at the end of the day, when the work day is over, it's like, what do you do around there? You know,
Yeah.
what's the nightlife? What's the art scene? What's the bars and restaurants? So all of that works together. So I think arts and culture play a really significant element in that quality of life, in attracting and retaining a highly qualified, trained workforce. Obviously, there's huge benefits on our economy through arts and culture. People that are patrons of performing arts events tend to also enjoy quality food and drink.
Mm-hmm.
They they are philanthropists that support other causes. So it becomes this microcosm of how people are spending their money and whether that money is retained locally in the community, which all of our performing arts groups have helped support. So we help the economy, we help with the livability, and we just make it a cool, interesting place to live. You know,
Yeah.
being involved in the arts itself is an opportunity for connection. Certainly for people that are new here, if they have a background in the arts, it's a great way to meet people, to make new friends, to find a social niche
Mm-hmm.
that you can connect with. And a lot of my now very close friends, that's how they started. They rolled into Tri-Cities. They got a good job, but didn't really know anybody, didn't know what was going on, and it was their involvement in choir, or theater, the ballet program, the symphony that gave them their social circle.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of speaking to that even more a little bit, you mentioned how the arts draw in people who are spending their money and are interested in certain causes and philanthropy and things like that, and how it can really support a community in terms of just bolstering the local economy and help local causes here. So, one of the things, obviously, that we're talking about today is, the nuclear history of the place, the things like that. And you've had several opportunities to merge those things artistically, most notably through the B Reactor concerts. You've done several, one or two. How many concerts have you done out there by now?
Yeah, the Mid-Columbia Mastersingers, we've been privileged to do four
Four.
annual concert programs out there. So we started in the fall of 2016, shortly after that site became one of the now three sites of the Manhattan Project National Historical Park that
Right.
operates under the National Park Service. Just like,
Right.
all the big cool Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, that it's now a part of that National Park Service, which really opened up access for the public, but also to create these opportunities to partner with them and do a private concert event.
Absolutely. What is it like to make music in that space?
It's incredible. It's transformative.
Mhm.
Um, when art and history and culture all come together and work in tandem, I think that that's really powerful. And as you as an artist, I'm sure you understand that venue can play an important role in creating that experience, that transformative experience for people. Unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges for us as artists in Tri-Cities is that we have such limited venue availability, especially for we performing arts organizations that are larger in scale, the symphony, the ballet company, Mid-Columbia Musical Theater, the Mastersingers. We've got kind of thin pickings of venues that work for us on a number of levels, whether it's the acoustical integrity of the space, since nearly all of us operate unplugged without a lot of additional amplification forces. That's just the nature of our industry or of our particular sector. Having ample parking, audience seating, backstage, green room availability, all those things, we're really incredibly limited. So I have always been looking for new creative places to make music. And as I mentioned before, a couple years ago, when I first went on that B Reactor tour, I immediately envisioned this would be such an awesome space. It's kind of, the construction of it reminds me a little bit of like Carnegie Hall, in that it's a rectangular space. It's not too fairly wide. The depth is enough that you can add seating for 200-ish people. Very tall ceilings, all hard reflective surfaces. Like it's all concrete. It's just an old industrial building that's not particularly beautiful visually, but has a really amazing acoustic aesthetic. It also reminds me of a cathedral-like space where there's a little bit of reverb in the room. And there's almost no other identical space in the Tri-Cities metro area. The Mastersingers, we perform at a lot of churches that are more modern, that were built not earlier than the 1940s. And a lot of that church construction, it's like they were trying to make you feel comfortable, like you're at home in your living room. So, really low ceilings, lots of plush carpeting and cushions that absorb sound. They're very acoustically dry, dead spaces. So the fact that the front room of the B Reactor that faces the core, the main core, is such an awesome space for a cappella unplugged singing, was really fortuitous. And then, of course, understanding the history of that space and what it represents, to look back on time with kindly eyes and to remember, what people were actually doing in that room 75 years ago now, that people were actually working there, walking around in suits, coming up with this newfangled theory around atomic energy and the production of a weapon, not even sure if it was going to work, right? It was just, it was this huge experiment that they mastered without the support of calculators and computers and, all the technology and tools that are at our disposal today, let alone the fact that they're in the middle of a desert, right? There's no infrastructure, there's nothing. There's a lot of dirt and it's really hot and it gets really windy and the dirt blows in your face. I mean, just extraordinary circumstances. So keep, honoring that history, understanding what that facility represents for good or ill. Also recognizing that there's still a lot of anxiety and debate over the actions that were taken, the lives that were lost in the use of those atomic bombs, the two that we ended up using on Japan. It's a difficult, complicated story to tell. And I think that part of our job as artists is to help people engage with that material. That can be very, very divisive to simply try to have a conversation around. But there's something about art that invites you in a non-confrontational way that you can think about it and come up with your own thoughts and responses to what went on, and then help make informed decisions about our future. What has that led us to, and what should we do now? So we're delighted that we've had the opportunity to partner with both the Department of Energy and the National Park Service. They are the federal agencies that work together to steward that particular space. So bringing in history and government and arts together, which doesn't happen very often. The Department of Energy, they're not in the business of producing concerts. and for the first couple of years when I was talking with them and kind of pitching this idea, they were very reluctant, and I can understand it's way outside of their purview, but to bring all those different industries together benefits all of us. And we're helping to tell the full story of Hanford, the full story of the Manhattan Project in a non-biased way. It's like, here's the facts, here's what happened, and we allow you as the audience to kind of decide how you feel about it, and if you are compelled to act going into the future. What does this mean for us now in 2020? So, I mean, it's the coolest thing I've ever done as a musician, as a choir director. I'm so sad that we've had to press pause on that program this year in the era of COVID, the uncertainties around when we're going to be able to legally, ethically, and safely gather together in person. Obviously, all of those public tours out of the Hanford site have also been suspended for the foreseeable future. But we've got a lot of great archival footage of those concerts, and I know that there'll be a time that we get to return and do it again. And I certainly hope artists like yourself get the chance to explore that space as a performance venue. It's just the coolest thing. I can talk about it all I want, but you understand, until you're there in the room and you're experiencing it live, it's not something that you can replicate on an audio or video recording.
Absolutely. It's such a unique space, and having taken the tour myself, it's just an incredible building to be faced with history in such a direct way. So you mentioned a little bit about bringing government and arts and communities together a little bit, and your latest endeavor actually has you doing that from a slightly different perspective than you've done before, in that you are running for Benton County Commissioner Position 1 in 2020. And I wanted to ask you and give you a chance to speak a little bit to what sort of changes you would hope to encourage or enact in this specific community to help improve our quality of life.
Well, let me preface that by saying I think we need more artists, more arts directors, artistic directors, conductors, music educators to be involved as elected officials. I think that our training and our skill sets are very complementary, that can be transferred into the realm of elected office. We serve at the pleasure of a large group of public stakeholders. I have over 150 volunteer singers that I am accountable to. I'm accountable to a board of directors that I work for really at their pleasure. I'm accountable to our whole community, to our audience, to our season ticket holders, to our donors, to our supporters. So a lot of my experience and skill set, I see a direct connection into the world of being an elected official. And frankly, I've thought about it for a long time, for a number of years. I've served in different leadership capacities, going back to high school in South Jersey, I was president of my class all 4 years. My fellow classmates saw something in me to want to put me out in front. And I've kind of naturally evolved into a lot of leadership positions over the years. I've been on the boards of a number of nonprofit organizations. I've served on city and state commissions. I'm currently on Washington State's Arts Commission, where I serve on the executive committee as the first vice chair. So I find that I've naturally rotated into these positions. And after several years of friends and colleagues in the community saying, Justin, you really should run for this or that. Mm-hmm. And I always found a way to politely say, thanks, but yeah, it's not really the right time. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm very busy with my work as an artist, and I'm grateful for that, because the opportunity that I've had to be a full-time musician in Tri-Cities, you know, I make a living, I pay the bills as a choir director. You know, it took me 12 years to build that, to build my salary in tandem with the growth of the Mastersingers as an organization. Mm-hmm. But, you know, we find ourselves now in the era of a global pandemic, and a lot of us artists, you know, our entire industry has been put on pause. Mm-hmm. Can't have rehearsals, can't have concerts. All of the traditional in-person services and programs that we're accustomed to have suddenly disappeared. And they've disappeared without a really clear timeline. You know, mm-hmm. Initially back in mid-March, when things started shutting down in Washington State, I was hopeful that by now we might have found our way out of that. And of course, you know, I now understand that this is the long haul. This mm-hmm. is a long road to hoe ahead of us. Mm-hmm. And I've seen a lot of my artist friends who have, by necessity, had to pivot into another area to make a living, to pay their monthly rent. You know, their opportunity, especially my performing friends who are freelance artists, mm-hmm. who are literally living gig to gig, paycheck to paycheck. All of their work has evaporated. Mm-hmm. So for me, I found myself, I couldn't say any longer, it's not the right time to run. I actually mm-hmm. have a lot of free time on my hands. I am certainly increasingly disillusioned with a lot of the failed leadership that I see at various levels of government. You know, we can talk about national politics, which everyone talks about on all social media platforms, but I try to focus locally, because I think we have the most control over our individual lives at the local level. Mm-hmm. City councils, county commissions, the decisions that they're making, the programs that they're prioritizing in terms of budget allocations, those are things that directly impact you and me the most. Mm-hmm. So I thought, you know, if ever there's an opportunity to get involved, I think it's now, because I have the time and the energy to commit to it. Right. I've certainly learned over the past 2 months that running for office is a full-time job. I've been committing 6 to 8 hours a day. That's not a complaint, it's an observation. I've enjoyed mm-hmm. it, but it is a tremendous commitment of time and resources. And I'm excited not just to be a voice and an advocate for our industry, but to be someone that is collaborative by nature. Mm. And, you know, we work in an industry that is nonpartisan. Arts and culture, it's not a Republican thing, it's not a Democrat thing, it's not a libertarian, it's not an any thing. The arts is for all. It is nonpartisan by its nature. Mm-hmm. And I have developed so many working relationships professionally, socially, with people of a variety of political stripes. Despite the fact that the position I'm running for is partisan, mm-hmm. I want to bring that collaborative community mindset to the table. I, as an artist, collaborate with people all the time. I'm a choral singer. I work together instinctively with groups of people. And I want to see our local government, our county commission in particular, be better team players with other area jurisdictions, with our city councils, with our port districts, with our neighbors across the river, our Franklin County commissioners, who steward a lot of bi-county services, a lot of our court programs, of course, our Benton Franklin Health District, which is front and center right now, mm-hmm. guiding us through this phased reopening approach in the state? How are we combating a global pandemic? You know, I have a master's degree. I respect people who are well trained, who are experts in their field.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in science. I believe in facts. You know, I want to work with scientists and medical experts, invite them to the table so that we can combat these issues together. So I could talk, we could do a whole session about my candidacy and my priorities, but I hope that gives a little glimpse of what I hope to do and why I'm running. And I'd certainly encourage my fellow artists out there, you know, think about standing for election. I think that